the U.S. and Israel launch military strikes, President Trump declares the supreme leader of Iran is dead.
Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime.
This may be a very significant symbolic and operational blow, but it is not the end of the operation, at least as described by President Trump.
Iran has launched a counterattack on U.S. bases across the Middle East.
The UAE, Kuwait is on alert. Qatar, missiles coming in and missiles being intercepted. There's another one.
The future of the Middle East as America enters into war with Iran. Good evening. The dictator is dead. The Israelis said it, President Trump said it, and now Iranian state television is confirming it. After more than 30 years ruling Iran as a brutal theocracy, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is no more. That is the biggest news in a day that began with a historic surprise. At around 10 a.m. local time in Iran, in the holy month of Ramadan, the U.S. and Israel launched a large-scale joint attack. The first signs, those plumes of smoke over Tehran. And then about 90 minutes later, President Trump announced a massive and ongoing combat operation aimed at toppling the regime there. He also laid out the history, the revolution 47 years ago that brought the first Ayatollah to power, replacing a secular society, the kind of place where women dressed and dreamed as they wished, with a system of strict religious theocracy. The president noted the decades of mayhem as well, the murder of service members in Beirut, the bombing of the USS Cole, and the arming of proxies that have, as the president put it, soaked the earth with blood and guts. But what now? How wide could this go? And what happens when the shooting ends? Many Iranians are celebrating today's attack, but the regime still stands, announcing a 40-day period of mourning for the late supreme leader. And with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard still firing rockets at Israel, at other American allies, and at U.S. bases throughout the region, vowing in just the past hour, in fact, that, quote, the most ferocious offensive operation in the history of the Iranian armed forces will begin in a few moments. The U.S. military buildup in the region is already the largest in a generation. And President Trump, in a post not long ago, promised that, quote, heavy and pinpoint bombing will continue, quote, uninterrupted throughout the week or as long as necessary. But he is also facing political opposition at home. Democrats characterizing this as an illegal war of choice that endangers U.S. troops and could draw the U.S. into a wider war. And so we are at a crossroads tonight, and we have it all covered for you. A team of reporters this hour, including Robert Costa, who spoke with President Trump just a short time ago. What the president told him. But first, Charlie D'Agata in Tel Aviv for us tonight. A long day into the night. Charlie, good evening.
Good evening to you, Tony. Good morning from here. It's almost dawn here. It has been a noisy night here in Tel Aviv. There's been air raid sirens, explosions, mostly intercepting incoming missiles. We actually have seen, there are no commercial flights in and out of this area, as you well know. We've seen a lot of military aircraft in the past half hour or so, at least 6 of them going by here. But this entire region is bracing for what day 2 brings. I can tell you that Israel's state of emergency is still in effect. They're warning residents to stay off the streets, stay close to shelters. As I said, we've had multiple air raid sirens, even in the past couple hours or so through the night. Schools and businesses are shut. And, you know, this is a sort of Monday for them. So schools and businesses would be in session. Israel is on edge, not just here, but other countries across the Middle East. They're bracing for more attacks to come because, as you've seen, Iranians have tried to attack U.S. bases, very well defended in places like Al Udeid, and the base, in Bahrain, but this is a better idea of what we were covering yesterday. The Israeli military announced a new wave of attacks against Iran's air defenses and ballistic missiles this morning. U.S. officials tell CBS News American forces are taking part again, too, in what the U.S. military has called Operation Epic Fury, releasing this footage showing F-35 stealth fighter jets, F-18s, cruise missiles launched from one of a dozen U.S. Navy destroyers from an undisclosed location. Intelligence and military officials tell CBS News around 40 Iranian officials were killed, along with the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, in a series of strikes. Iran's military forces had already launched retaliatory strikes earlier in the day when President Trump posted a speech outlining the main objective, regime change, urging Iranian citizens to rise up.
I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. Stay sheltered. Don't leave your home. It's very dangerous outside. Bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take.
And while Iran's supreme leader may be dead, its military continues to fight on. And President Trump has vowed to keep up the intensity, too. U.S. forces are already following those orders.
Charlie D'Agata for us live from Tel Aviv tonight. Charlie, thank you very much. This operation, which the Pentagon is calling Epic Fury, is also epically complex and full of risk. For more on what goes into an operation like this, let's bring in retired Admiral Mark Montgomery, who served 32 years in the Navy as a nuclear-trained surface warfare officer. He's now at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy. Also here is CBS News contributor and Marine Corps veteran Elliot Ackerman. Admiral, I'd like to begin with you. Thank you very much for joining us here. You were a strike group, carrier group planner at one point. You know more than anyone on this channel right now about what would into a strike like this. Take us through what you saw, what stood out.
You know, I thought it was a good, comprehensive first day, and you can obviously see that the number one target here is senior leadership, both of the Iranian, the Supreme Leader, but also of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. I think what went alongside this was what's called suppression of enemy air defense. So we simultaneously would have attacked the remaining air defense systems that weren't destroyed by Israel in the 12-day war last year. And this is all a precursor for follow-on strikes over the next, I would suggest, probably 2 weeks, where we go after the other targets that didn't need the surprise that the targeting of the Iranian leadership did. So you would clearly hit them on day one while they were loose with their security, as loose as they would be with their security, and where you could get as many as possible. And while getting the Supreme Leader was very important, you can also see they made some serious inroads on other IRGC leadership and military leadership.
Admiral, you've seen the response from Iran. President Trump said he expected it to be double. That might be bluster. What do you make of it?
You know, I think this is what you get in an initial response. I think we'll see more over the next few days. So there'll now be a race between us treading or destroying their ability to launch weapons at Israel and at U.S. forces stationed throughout the Middle East, and the Iranian ability to get those weapons out, cleared, and get a shot off. So I suspect the next few days worth of strikes will be heavily focused on current Iranian ballistic and cruise missiles and on their drone launch facilities to ensure that these get knocked out. But this was a decent response. I was surprised that the shot got into our NAV Center, Naval Forces Central Command headquarters in Bahrain. But also, we should assume that the adversary will be able to impose some cost on us in retaliation.
Elliot, let's bring you into this. Are you skeptical of the wisdom of this operation?
I think it all depends on the outcome. This is obviously a very complex operation. We are seeing basically, move one moving into move two of what's going to be a 40-move game. So there's a lot of risk inherent with this, as there is any time you embark upon a path of war. And I think we're just going to have to watch very closely in the days, weeks, and perhaps months ahead.
Do you believe this will be an air-only campaign, or if the goal is truly regime change, it will require boots on the ground?
I think that's an area where the Trump administration has a lot of control, and I think they've signaled very clearly that boots on the ground is a bridge too far for them. I think what this campaign is going to rely on quite significantly, and the president alluded to it in his comments, is going to be the actions of the Iranian people. This air campaign, the boots on the ground for this air campaign, is eventually going to be Iranian civil society coming out in the streets and demanding a change of regime. And we haven't seen that yet, but that's what I'm going to be watching for in the days and weeks ahead.
Admiral, back to you on this. You mentioned a 2-week campaign. Are you imagining that as air only?
I am, and I agree with Elliot. I mean, the 2 times that we've successfully used U.S. air-only campaigns to change governments, Libya in 2011 and Kosovo in 1999, there was large armed insurgent groups that we were enabling during those attacks. What we have right now are large groups of activists and disaffected citizens, not large armed groups. So we'll have to see what happens in this. The 2-week campaign I envision would be one that knocks down their remaining ballistic missile, both their systems, but also I would hit their factories. In the second week, I would hit their production capabilities of both drones and ballistic missiles. And then if we haven't in fact obliterated the nuclear program, then I would restrike the nuclear program elements that still remain.
Elliot, you mentioned the Iranian civil society as the next step in all of this, but one never knows when you knock down a leader what grows in its place. Are you confident that what comes next will be better than what was?
I think what we'll potentially have is a power vacuum, and that creates a whole host of challenges. I mean, is there a scenario in which Iranian civil society rises up and demands a peaceful, a democratic transition of power? I mean, sure, that's something we can imagine. But can we also imagine where Iranian civil society fractures, where you still have regime hardliners who break off, and you see Iran entering into a period of internal instability, leading up into civil war and a Syria-like outcome? That's also not outside the realm of possibility and would be disastrous not only for the people of Iran, but create incredible instability in the region. All of this is in play right now, and I think the United States, because this is an air-only campaign, we will only have the ability to affect so much in the weeks and months going forward.
Admiral, in our final 30 seconds here, I'm curious, how long can these strike groups float off the coast in the region?
Strike groups, especially when you're in combat like this, you do need some breaks, but the reality is they can maintain station for 3 to 6 months. Now, the Ford is in a unique condition, the aircraft carrier strike group in the Eastern Mediterranean. It's already been on deployment for 10.5 months. It's about to break the record for longest post-Vietnam deployment. So that one may need to be replaced, but the Lincoln can stay on station for 3 to 6 months easily.
I appreciate the expertise. Admiral Mark Montgomery and Elliot Ackerman, thank you both. In announcing today's joint strike on Iran, the president laid out his rationale for major combat operations, promising to target the regime's weapons and, quote, annihilate their navy.
Just imagine how emboldened this regime would be if they ever had and actually were armed with nuclear weapons as a means to deliver their message. For these reasons, the United States military is undertaking a massive and ongoing operation to prevent this very wicked, radical dictatorship from threatening America and our core national security interests. We are going to destroy their missiles and raise their missile industry to the ground. It will be totally, again, obliterated.
But let's stay on this question of timing, the timing of this strike. Nuclear negotiations were still technically underway, set to resume in person on Monday, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio had been scheduled to travel to the region. So what changed, or was all of that a diversion? Let's go to CBS senior White House correspondent Weijia Zhang, who's been working the phones tonight. Weijia, what are you hearing?
But Tony, senior administration officials tell CBS News that while the long-term concern is Iran's nuclear ambitions, they believe there was an immediate threat from missiles, that Iran was preparing to potentially launch a preemptive attack as President Trump weighed the possibility of military action during those negotiations, adding that if Trump had waited, the amount of American casualties and damage would have been substantially higher. President Trump monitored the strikes from his Florida resort with top aides and announced them to the world on social media at 2:30 in the morning.
The United States military is undertaking a massive and ongoing operation to prevent this very wicked, radical dictatorship from threatening America.
Just hours earlier, Trump attended a formal event.
We gotta go work. Oh my God. I gotta go to work. And indicated negotiations to find a diplomatic solution with Iran were not going well. I'm not happy with the fact that they're not willing to give us what we have to have. Trump wanted Iran to fully dismantle its nuclear program, stop enriching uranium, and limit its ballistic missile program. But Iran refused, just as it has for decades and decades. They've rejected every opportunity to renounce their nuclear ambitions, and we can't take it anymore. Iran claims it has not enriched uranium since June, when the U.S. attacked 3 of its nuclear facilities. But it also blocked international inspectors from confirming. Today, Trump worked the phones with world leaders, including several from the Middle East. As they wait to see the extent of Iran's response, Trump sought to set sober expectations. The lives of courageous American heroes may be lost, and we may have casualties. That often happens in war.
He has started a war, and it has eerie similarities to the way Iraq began.
Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton served 4 tours in Iraq. He is among the Democrats who have criticized Trump for not seeking congressional approval before attacking Iran.
You have to obey the Constitution, and that means going before Congress and asking Congress to decide, is it worth putting young American lives on the line with great risk to achieve these goals?
Democrats plan to force a vote on a bipartisan bill that would require President Trump to seek congressional authorization to use military force in Iran, but it would likely fail with near unanimous Republican opposition. And even if it did pass, Trump could veto it. As for this hour tonight, President Trump continues to closely monitor the situation from Florida alongside members of his national security team. He also attended a GOP fundraiser tonight at his Florida resort. His press secretary says the Republican Party is, quote, more important than ever. Tony.
All right, Weisha, thank you very much. Chief Washington analyst Robert Costa spoke with President Trump by phone this evening, and he joins us now. Robert, good evening. What did the president tell you?
Good to be with you, Tony. When I spoke to President Trump just before he went to that GOP fundraiser by phone, he expressed great confidence in the military strikes so far. He notably said he's monitoring the situation, and he's somewhat surprised that the retaliatory response from Iran has been less than expected by the United States and its allies, though, of course, it's a fluid situation. And I asked him, Tony, what's next? What are you trying to look for here? Is a diplomatic solution possible in this crisis? And he said, yes, he believes the strikes could bring Iran closer to a diplomatic solution that he believes is right for the region, right for the United States, because they're, quote, getting beat up so badly. I said, in the wake of the killing of the Ayatollah, who's in charge of Iran now? He says he has been briefed about all of the leadership shakeups inside Iran. He would not say who exactly he believes is running the country right now, but he says, I know exactly who is, I just won't tell you. There are some good candidates, he says, who could lead Iran in the weeks moving forward should discussions pick up. And I also asked him, I said, what about Congress? We've seen some of the Democratic response. We just spoke to the congressman from Massachusetts, and he said, look, I'm always willing to work with Congress, but on this front, in so many fronts, Tony, he is willing to use his executive power, as he told me, to take out what he perceives to be threats to the United States.
All right, Bob, thank you very much. Appreciate it. I want to broaden our conversation now and bring in Congressman Rick Crawford, an Army veteran from a military family now representing Arkansas's 1st District. He's also chair of the House Intelligence Committee, making him a member of the so-called Gang of Eight. That's a group of congressional leaders brought in on high-level classified briefings from the executive branch. Representative Crawford, thank you again for joining us. Because you are a member of the Gang of Eight, you are one of the few Americans who had advance notice of this strike this morning. What can you tell us about why now, why the timing was right, and what the goals are?
Well, I think there are 3 goals to be addressed here. We've heard a lot of analysts talk about it. One is the nuclear capability that they continue to engage in. The other is their ballistic missile production and deployment. And the third one was the regime change piece that is we're seeing, these organic uprisings in Iran. And we're seeing the regime had killed upwards of 30,000 of their own people as a result. So There were some compelling reasons here, but I would argue that, the notion of starting a war with Iran, I don't think that people realize we've been at war with Iran since 1979. So President Trump is not starting a war, he's finishing one.
One of the questions Democrats have raised is whether the president should have gone to Congress for approval. Now, Congress, of course, hasn't declared war formally since World War II. But there is the question of whether this is really a preemptive strike or merely a preventative one. Was there an imminent threat from Iran?
I'm not sure that there's much of a difference between a preventive or a preemptive strike in this context. I think what we're seeing here was there was a sufficient threat and a 47-year history that we had reached a point at which we are not going to take anymore. And I think President Trump recognized that this was an opportunity that the timing was perfect and it was surgically precise. And the conditions on the ground are such that the Iranian people needed assistance so they can affect their own self-determination and really take matters into their own hands. Now, regime change is a byproduct of that. I welcome it, quite frankly. And if you've seen the footage from around the world, not only in Iran, but in the diaspora communities here in the United States and elsewhere in the world, they welcome that change as well. What's next, Congressman, to the best of our knowledge? Well, you had some really good analysis in a previous segment with the Admiral and Elliot Ackerman. I think laid out a pretty extensive analysis of what we can expect. You'll continue to see airstrikes, and it'll be very precise, targeting areas of things like the southern portion, what they call the southern ballistic missile belt there in the southern region of Iran, the production so that we can pretty much curtail their magazine depth. It's going to take a little bit of patience because most of those ballistic missile sites are mobile. So it will take a little bit of time, but the president has indicated that. But what we see are the conditions on the ground are ripe for organic regime change. And, we pray for the Iranian people to be able to organize and engage in self-determination. Congressman, it's been pointed out that this is the largest buildup of U.S. forces in the Middle East since the start of the Iraq War in 2003. For many Americans, they wake up today and they wonder, is this a here we go again moment? To those people, including, I'm sure, some of your own voters and voters for President Trump, what do you say to calm the nerves? Well, I think we have to take a look back at the history here with this particular country. And myself, I actually was part of an engagement that involved Iran back in the 80s. And then there was, since 1983, the attack on the Marine barracks in Lebanon. And, of course, go back to 1979, when they took American hostages from the embassy in Tehran. There's just a laundry list of abuses of the United States and our allies and the engagement and funding of terrorism for 47 years. And this is, I would liken this moment in history to almost equal to bringing down the Berlin Wall. The job's not finished yet, but that is the historic arc that we're seeing play out in front of us here, in that we're doing something that is actually beneficial to the entire world, particularly the Gulf region there. And I think that our allies recognize that. I think Iran made some really strategic mistakes by attacking their neighbors in the region, unprovoked attacks against Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates. That was not a good move, and it basically cemented the relationship with the United States. Congressman, this is not the first time that President Trump has used military action against Iran while technically talks, diplomacy was still afoot. Other times he has done so as well. And it raises the question, I heard it posed today, I'll pose it to you. Is America now a country where instead of the military being a last resort, the military is more like a first resort? I think the president has engaged in an earnest diplomatic outreach to Iran when other countries didn't, and when other regimes didn't. For example, the Obama administration didn't engage directly with Iran. This was, the JCPOA was engaged, through intermediaries, and we saw the result of that. This is the president doing what he said he would do. He wants to make peace, and in fact, we've seen him make peace with other engagements around the world. This is no different. He makes the offer to go to the table with the Iranians and what you and I weren't in the room, but what I did hear from folks who were in the room was a complete level of belligerence and arrogance that they absolutely refused to even consider those three key points that we've made tonight with regard to what those negotiations would entail. So that's an intractable position. And, all the goodwill in the world on the part of Donald Trump may not have been enough. They simply were not serious about engaging in a diplomatic solution.
All right. Congressman Rick Crawford of Arkansas's 1st District. Thank you very much, Congressman.
You bet. Thank you.
Next, the big questions right now. How long does this continue? How wide does it go? And what happens when it all ends? We'll take a look at the big picture and the political upheaval in the Middle East. We are back with a CBS News live special, War with Iran, and we start with side-by-side satellite imagery. You can see the before and after versions showcasing the catastrophic damage at the Ayatollah's compound in Tehran. You can see that after the strikes, the buildings are decimated. There's debris everywhere, smoke rising from the ashes. With the U.S. and Israel launching this war with Iran, this could be one of the most consequential days for the Middle East in generations. To put it all into context, let's bring in analyst and author Douglas Murray, plus Chief Washington Correspondent Major Garrett. Major, wait right there. I'm going to start with Douglas here on set. There's reporting from the Wall Street Journal tonight that Israel has managed to hack a popular Iranian prayer app, and it is sending messages telling members of the Revolutionary Guard to leave and liberate the country. What do you make of that?
First of all, it's a tactic that the Israelis have used elsewhere. They've used it in Gaza. They've used it against Hezbollah in Lebanon. So it's a familiar tactic. The message itself is simply reiterating what President Trump said in his late night message, which is to request that the Revolutionary Guards, the Basij and others put down their weapons. And in Trump's language, he said last night, now is the time to do that. Otherwise, there's another route further down the road.
So let's talk about the otherwise. What are the implications in the days, weeks, or longer ahead for America, Iran, the world?
Well, the first thing is, of course, you mentioned at the beginning how historic this is. Since 1979, the Iranian revolutionary government has, first of all, been repressing, of course, the Iranian people. It's been colonizing the entire region. It's been colonizing Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen. And of course, it's been the world's foremost sponsor of terror. So the fact that that regime seems to have been certainly decapitated and seems now to be tottering means, first of all, that we will very likely see a very different Middle East. But there's a secondary thing, which is, of course, and President Trump did refer to this a bit in his remarks, perhaps not enough in my view, was that don't forget that the terrorism that this regime has been spreading has not been limited to the Middle East. The regime spread terror to South America. It's tried to carry out assassinations here in New York of dissidents. It tried only a couple of years ago to kill a former American Secretary of State and a former National Security Advisor in Washington, D.C. So the fact that that foremost sponsor of terror is now seemingly on its last legs is something that's going to have huge implications way beyond the Middle East.
All of what you said has been true, though, for a while now. So why right now? Was it just the moment presented itself?
It seems to me that the moment presented itself. If you consider the difference between what's happened in the last 24 hours and what happened last summer it was very clear that in the 12-day war, that decapitation of the regime, specifically the targeting of the Ayatollah, was not on the table. That seemed to be the one thing that was absolutely not on the table. Taking out the nuclear sites was the main objective then, but not regime decapitation. Something has changed in the last year. Possibly it's simply President Trump's realization of the intractable nature of the Iranian revolutionary government in negotiations. They have strung on negotiating team after negotiating team from the West, from the international community for decades on every one of these issues.
Douglas, thank you very much. Major Garrett, I want to bring you into this conversation. The president likes to describe himself as the president of peace. He ran a campaign of no more wars in the Middle East. And then from the perspective here of someone in his own coalition, this looks like a new war. What do you make of it?
Yes, but there are times, Tony, when we make the observation that President Trump is so different than all of his predecessors and operates differently and doesn't necessarily adhere to the conventions of the presidency as conducted by presidents before him. In this one respect, there is a constant. To pick up on the point just made, since 1979, every American president has to one extent or another been frustrated, bedeviled, deterred, and in some cases haunted by the Islamic regime in Iran and its use of terror cell networks and proxies, not just in the Middle East, Europe, South America, even Asia. Every American president has had to deal with this. Carter, Reagan, Bush 1, and Clinton all dealt with not only the Iranian Revolution in 1979, but its expansion of use of terror throughout the region. And then it became a much bigger problem after 9/11, the global war on terror, then its nuclear ambitions. That was Bush 2, that was Trump, Obama, Trump again. Biden, all of them have been dealing with this. So that's one constant thread through the American presidency from 1979 to now. And it's at that point that I believe President Trump is saying not only is the time now, but Iran and its regime and its proxies have never been weaker. So when they are weak, it's time to strike. Not that they present this particularly malevolent new threat, but it may be time now to deal with that long-running threat from a position of, if not maximum advantage, near maximum advantage.
But, Major, we have midterm elections coming up. The president does need to have a coalition in Congress. This is difficult for them to explain to people. The polling is not in favor of a unilateral strike without approval from Congress. How does this play?
Well, let's go right to our polling data, Tony, on that very point. Our polling unit talked to Americans before the President's State of the Union address, asked one question. Has the Trump administration clearly explained the U.S. position on military action against Iran? 72% told us the answer to that question was no. Only 28% believed the administration had clearly explained what was about to happen or what it was contemplating. Now let's go after the State of the Union address. We asked some other questions. How should the United States approach Iran's current leadership? Let's go to the lowest rated answer, 18%. Remove them from power with force. Then next, 22%. Do not get involved, 22%. Pressure them with sanctions, 38%. Negotiate with them through diplomacy. We also asked, does Trump need approval from Congress for military action? 74%, Tony, said, yes, he does. That's clearly not happening. One last question. U.S. military action against Iran to stop them from making a nuclear weapon. How did that come out? 51% would favor, 49% would oppose. Very closely divided on those central questions. Tony?
All right, Major, thank you very much. Douglas, while I have you here, I think of Rick Crawford, the congressman, his first district there in Arkansas, the people sitting there tonight and all over the country asking themselves, what does this have to do with my life? How does it make my interest better?
Well, a huge amount is simply going to depend on the success or otherwise of this operation. If you look at the polling data from the operation in Venezuela the other week, the initial response among floating voters was pretty negative about it. Once it turned out that, an extraordinary operation, highly successful, Maduro seized and brought to New York, those numbers of approval went up hugely. But there's a caveat to that, and any Republican you speak to and anyone in the administration you speak to, as you know, knows this, which is none of these issues are actually midterm issues. It's the economy, it's cost of living that are midterm issues. But nevertheless, as was just mentioned, this issue of the Iranian revolutionary government is something that, as several people this hour have said, has bedeviled not just the Middle East, but America for 47 years now. We have been strung along in the West on nuclear issues, on terrorism issues, and much more. All of this time, clearly there was a moment that was seen that could be seized. Donald Trump seized it, and if it's successful, I'll imagine this success will have an awful lot of people claiming a bit of it.
Douglas Murray, thank you very much. Major Garrett, thank you as well to you. Ahead, the risks here at home, cities across the U.S. on high alert, the concerns of what could happen next. Our coverage of the war with Iran continues after a quick break. Welcome back to a CBS News live special, War with Iran, and with the Islamic Republic tonight promising a ferocious response to strikes by the U.S. and Israel. Let's turn back now to the homeland and concerns here over whether Iran has so-called sleeper cells preparing to retaliate. CBS correspondent Jerika Duncan has been looking into security precautions here at home.
Tonight, federal law enforcement officials are warning of a heightened security threat in the U.S. following those deadly strikes in Iran. Security has been increased in dozens of cities across the country. Hundreds today marched near the White House. And during this protest in New York City, drones and helicopters monitored the scene from above as demonstrators called for an end to the strikes.
It's not the United States' responsibility to conduct regime change abroad. If we want to really focus on human rights and regime change, we should focus on it here.
We spoke with NYPD Counterterrorism Deputy Commissioner Rebecca Weiner. Every day, she meets with more than a dozen intelligence officers from around the world.
Because of the international partners that you work with, I wonder if you had any heads up that this was happening, or did you learn like everyone else this morning?
I think we've all been reading the tea leaves over the last several weeks about what could transpire, and that gave us opportunity to make sure that we're leaning into all of our partners, all of our intelligence resources.
Does the threat level increase now that we know the Supreme Leader has been killed?
The threat level increases whenever there's a conflict like what's happening in the broader Middle East, regardless of a leader being killed or not. Our response is to focus on New York City and what the risk is to our city.
What would you tell folks who are nervous, who are genuinely concerned about the safety of not only New Yorkers, but this country?
We deploy all these resources so that New Yorkers can go about their days knowing that we have the resources, we have the partnerships, and we have the intelligence in play to keep our city safe.
And when it comes to those reported sleeper cells, Deputy Commissioner Weiner would not go as far as to say they are tracking them, but she did say they are leaning into any tips and any leads. Tony?
Jericka, thank you very much, and we'll be back with you in a moment on another topic, so stick right there. Meantime, a more in-depth look at threats here in the homeland. I want to bring in CBS News national security contributor Samantha Vinograd. She served as former Assistant Secretary for Counterterrorism at the Department of Homeland Security. Sam, thank you very much for joining us. So the Department of Homeland Security is saying it's unlikely that large-scale physical attacks will happen here in the U.S. However, they say Iran could launch more targeted physical attacks, smaller scale, and that cyber attacks are possible. What are we looking at?
Well, what we're looking at is the fact that for the past several decades, the Iranian regime has seriously invested in surrogate networks in the United States and around the world. Those surrogate networks have been successful in trying to launch assassination attempts against government officials, dissidents, members of the Jewish community, and others. And so for that reason, in my experience, Tony, the federal, state, and local government officials at any given time have a serious amount of ongoing investigations into Iranian-backed criminal and counterterrorism-related threats. Certainly, after the assassination of the Supreme Leader and the ongoing kinetic conflict in the Middle East, the ability for the regime to try to tap into those surrogate networks to try to retaliate for what's happening is even higher. And that's why we are seeing really unprecedented cooperation between all levels of government and probably the private sector to try to share information, increase intelligence gathering, intelligence analysis, and to deter attacks by putting out more physical patrols, more visible law enforcement, and other matters.
Sam, how credible, how imminent are the potential attacks, the threats against the Jewish community, the U.S. government officials, the U.S. military community? What do you know at this hour?
What I can say is the Iranians have come pretty close in the past. And really, I've worked closely with the NYPD and others. We have a really incredible law enforcement intelligence community in this country. But the Iranian regime is quite sophisticated and good at what it does. I am not a huge fan of saying there's no credible or imminent threat, because that can change very, very quickly for something to go to non-credible and to become imminent. Instead, I think it's important that members of the public remain on heightened alert, that if you see something, say something. And when it comes to cyber hygiene, when it comes to emails and links and files that you're getting right now, that everybody stay on high alert to the environment around them while all of this is ongoing.
All right, Sam Vinograd, thank you very much. Another concern on Americans' minds is the potential economic impact this strike will have on oil and gas prices here at home. I want to go back to Drika, as promised. Thank you very much for sticking around. What's going to happen to oil and gas prices?
Yeah, so we've been looking into this, and essentially, you know that the oil is traded on a global market. Because oil trades on that market, any disruption to the supply can spike oil prices worldwide. Now, the bigger concern may be access to the Strait of Hormuz, a key area used to carry roughly 20% of the world's oil. How these oil markets react will depend on how long this conflict lasts. Bottom line, Tony, if crude oil jumps significantly, drivers in the U.S. could see prices go up within a matter of days.
We'll be monitoring it closely. Drika, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Coming up, cheering in the streets in Iran, we're going to speak with an Iranian dissident living in exile here in the U.S. who has been dreaming of this moment for years. You're watching CBS News. You are watching a CBS News live special, War with Iran, and we bring you live pictures of mourners already lining up for the funeral of their supreme leader, which will take place on Sunday in Iran. These are pictures from Iranian state television. While there are people mourning, there are also plenty of Iranians celebrating at this hour. And with us now is CBS News contributor and Iranian-American journalist Masih Alinejad, who has survived not one, not two, but three plots by Iran's regime to kill or kidnap her. Masih, thank you very much for being here. It sounds like you've lost your voice a little bit. Is that related to today's events?
I have been singing, shouting, screaming, celebrating with my people inside Iran. I was talking to mothers. Ibrahim Kitabdar's mothers, Peshman's mothers, Puya's mother. These are the mothers that they lost their children. And I hear their voices that they are celebrating the killing of the murderers, Ali Khamenei. So that's why I lost my voice. But don't worry, when I need it to come back to me.
I see the celebrations. I can sense the joy in the streets. Is there apprehension about what comes next?
You know, of course, people are worried. But this is the time that my people, Iranians, they are experiencing pain and hope. Because I'm talking about the regime that massacred more than 40,000 people. But in the street, people are just screaming out of joy because they believe this is going to be the beginning of a future that we don't have killers in power, a future that people can have a normal life. You know, for many of Americans watching me, maybe this is about a country miles away from America. They say that this is the story of people that we don't maybe know them. But for me, this is my life story. I was put in prison when I was only 19 years old. I was pregnant. This is the regime. Think about it. They have stolen my life. They have stolen my family, my country, everything.
Are you hearing talk of anyone in particular who might be able, from Iranian civil society, to step forward, not part of the regime, not part of the revolution, on a whole nother track, and be the leader that I think people like yourself are looking for in Iran?
This regime cannot be reformed. So definitely we're not looking, oh my God, I lost my voice.
It's understandable.
We're not looking for anyone from this regime. And people in the street, they're naming Prince Pahlavi. And he says that he believes in fair and free election. I believe that we deserve to have a transition from this government to this regime, to a secular democracy. I'm not a political leader, but I believe that Iranian can have a government by voting, having fair and free election. So that's why I'm calling on Europeans. This is the Berlin Wall moment to meet with the opposition, to think about an Iran without the Islamic Republic. Because this is a regime sending killers in the region, in America, in Europe, everywhere. So there is only one solution to end the war, endless war, to end the root cause of the war, which is the Islamic Republic.
But in the Berlin Wall moment, the wall came down and the Guard stood down. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard is not standing down. What happens next?
I think because they don't see strong signal. As soon as they see signal from the European leaders all over the world, you know, Arab leaders, where are they? If there is think about it, a political coalition in Iran and outside Iran, like the Europeans, Americans, leaders from Arab countries, if they get all united, having a plan, a strategic plan to see an Iran without Islamic Republic, that will send a signal to the Revolution Guards members to put their guns down. I think we need to see this signal.
10:54 here in the East. How do you think future generations will look back at this moment?
Oh my God, I can't talk. I lost my voice. You have to bring me back tomorrow. I need some hot water.
All right, let's get the ladies some hot water. Masih Alinejad, thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it.
I will invite you to my beautiful country. I want to hug my family. It has been 15 years. That's why I get really upset when I see some anti-war Americans taking to the streets, my fellow citizens, take to the street to celebrate the killing of a terrorist. Because this is not about politics. This is all about normal life, having dignity for Iranians. We share the same values. You want these terrorists? Don't feel sorry for terrorists. Feel sorry for my people inside Iran. The new generation, they deserve to have democracy. It breaks my heart when I see Americans in the streets. They chant, I am Hamas. Hamas is killing Iranians, killing people in Gaza. If you care about free Palestine, help us to free Palestine from Islamic Republic. I want to talk to Americans, but I will be back tomorrow.
All right, Masih Alinejad, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to a CBS News primetime special, War with Iran. We are nearly 24 hours now into a whole new world, and none of us knows exactly where this is headed. But here's where we are. In a surprise attack this morning, the United States and Israel launched a massive aerial assault on Iran, decapitating its leadership and, in perhaps the most notable development of all, killing that country's supreme leader. For more than 45 years, Iran has been an iron-fisted theocracy, ruled by leaders who turned a country where women worked and dressed as they pleased into a religious dictatorship that crushed dissent and killed thousands of its own people in just the past couple of months alone. Even as Iran retaliates tonight, that era of repression may be over. There are no reports of American casualties at this hour from Iranian airstrikes. There are, however, celebrations in the streets of Tehran. President Trump told the Iranian people, take control of your government. That, quote, the hour of their freedom is at hand. We'll be watching out for it, and we shall see. For now, our coverage will continue on your local news and tomorrow on Face the Nation. I'm Tony Dokoupil. Thank you for joining us tonight. Good night for now.